question. Valerie K asks, Tim, Omega seems to be Lamborghini to Rolex's Ferrari. Impressive by itself, but always in the shadow of a larger legend. Can this ever change? Okay, now we get to the crux of tonight's episode. Mustang versus Camaro. Flamand versus Walloon. Star Trek versus Star Wars. We got a lot of that tonight. BMW M versus AMG Mercedes-Benz. And finally, for the fanboys, Aliens versus Predator. Okay, what do they all have in common? They are like Omega versus Rolex, the endless war. This is a thought experiment by me. Okay, what would it take to restore Omega's pre-quartz crisis preeminence over Rolex when Omega was often the chronometry competition winner, the volume leader, and the brand of reference in luxury and mainstream horology from Switzerland, often the leading Swiss brand internationally? Well, let's talk about this. Parity is really the only possibility. Even if Omega were to outsell Rolex, Rolex would still have to make a mistake to lose its super premium image and a brand name recognition that transcends the watch space. Their Ferrari, their Coke, their Apple. That's not going to happen. Rolex is going to stay tough. So realistically, what is it going to take for Omega to move on par? Well, product volumes, public stature, customer recognition. Let's just consider product volumes. Right now, the most recent information we have is that Rolex certified about 800,000 chronometers in 2015. Omega certified about 511,000. That's the last year for which the COSC will ever release those figures. So figure Omega is somewhere between 70 and 80% of Rolex's output when we count Omega's non-chronometer certified watches. Okay, so this is what has to change. Omega probably needs fewer products. There are so many Omegas, and believe me, I have made my career in memorizing stuff photographically, and I have trouble getting my head around all of the Omega models, variants, special editions, and even a couple of models they don't even advertise that they make. It's tough. That said, the product is sound. Fewer model lines. Now, Omega on paper has 5 model lines. And that's if you count the specialties, things like the tourbillon, things like the museum watches. But once you start delving deeper, you look at Seamaster, that's all the Aquaterras. That's quartz, that's mechanical, that's the 300 meter, that's the Planet Ocean, that's the Seamaster 300. It's like a horizon that just extends so quickly before your eyes that you're overwhelmed by the blinding flash and the expanse of what's possible, which is cool if you're into infinite choice, but it does confuse consumers. Now, fewer watches, at least initially. Omegas right now can be purchased without a weight at list. You can go out, you can buy an Omega new with no weight. If you want to get a steel Rolex sports watch, you're going to wait, which tells me Omega needs to balance supply against demand a little bit better than they do. So fewer redesigns, set the template, and refine. Omega's great success in terms of design have been the 1993 Omega Seamaster 300, which is 25 years young this year at Basel and actually got a revision, not a redesign, but a revision. That's an incredible run. The Seamaster has never had a run that long without a full apocalyptic start from scratch redesign. And then there is the Moonwatch. But between those two pillars, you have a ton of watches that get redesigned so frequently and so dramatically that it's difficult to sell someone an older Omega on the basis that planned obsolescence is a thing at Omega and it's not a thing at Rolex. If you own today's Omega, you're pretty much certain that tomorrow's Omega is going to be different enough that people can tell the difference. It's like tail fins from the 1940s through the 1950s. From the 40s through the mid-50s, they got bigger and bigger, and then from the late 50s through the mid-60s, they got smaller and smaller. People could always tell what year was what, and that was not a great thing if you owned last year's model. So Omega, your designs are excellent, your technology is superb, the product quality has never been better, and I'm a fan. I just think that more gradual evolution of the product is something that has to be implemented. Maybe over 10 years, this is woven into the fabric of Omega corporate strategy, but that's probably one of the strategies necessary. Okay, now, the other thing, focus on building ironclad relationships with the best regional dealers. They know the local client better than anyone. If anyone can convince a local buyer To take an Omega over a Rolex or a Breitling product, it's going to be a dealer who has an existing relationship and has already established trust with that client. That's hard to do when you're looking at a Tourbillon boutique, which is Swatch's multi-brand boutique, and they have tons of watches, tons of brands, people who come and go from the dealer floor. There's not a whole lot of focus on one brand or emphasis on a single product or a single product line expertise. Whereas a local dealer that carries Omega as their flagship brand and is on a first name basis with the customer because it's a family company, it is a company built on tradition, it has long-term employees, that's going to be such a strong advocate for the Omega brand that the potential there cannot be overlooked. Remember, Rolex doesn't have factory boutiques. They don't have them. They don't exist. When you see something that looks like a Rolex factory boutique, it is a partner that is an authorized dealer of Rolex running a Rolex boutique. So Omega needs to focus on working with the best authorized dealers locally where they already have the customer relationships and they know the market. Now, also, factory boutiques have not worked out for Omega like they have for the Richemont brands. Richemont recently drew over 50% of its sales from its own factory stores. With Swatch, it's more like 20 to 25%, so they're not giving up as much if they transition to a authorized dealer-based model, with maybe a few flagship Omega-owned stores in key locations. And finally, remember, Rolex and Patek, they don't have armies of factory hands working in factory stores. They're just authorized dealers and trust between the dealer and the factory, and they do gangbusters. That's an effective strategy. Regionally appropriate products are also key. Don't feel obligated to sell all Omega watches in all markets. We understand that Omega is a global brand. The big four Swiss brands, watch-wise globally, are Omega, Rolex, Cartier, and Longines globally. But Omega is the brand. The watch can vary with location, which is to say you shouldn't have Eastern markets getting the Constellation Globemaster that the West loves because the Manhattan or Griffin Claw constellation is a monstrous franchise in East Asia. Likewise, you shouldn't be selling small yellow gold and rose gold diamond-studded men's watches in the Griffin Claw constellation line in the United States and Western Europe because those are not regionally appropriate. It may be that there are extras from the Far East. Keep them there. Wait till the demand rises. Wait until there's a pull on that inventory. Don't let inventory that doesn't represent you well in a given market travel to that market. Focus on Omega the brand in all markets, but specific products that play to the localities in each market. Also, communicate Omega's design advantages, history, technology, and design. Rolex has nothing like the coaxial escapement. They have nothing like the SI-14 in the mainstream of their watches. They're very cautious about implementing silicon in their watches. Omega, talk up the fact that you've got silicon technology. You've got twin mainspring barrels. You've got coaxial escapements. Talk about the fact that you've got 600-meter divers with display casebacks. Talk about all of that, plus your impeccably finished ceramic cases for which Rolex has no answer. Focus on your history. It goes back farther than Rolex by decades. This year we're celebrating 170 years of the companies that ultimately became Omega after the original La Générale Watch Co. Rolex's history starts in 1905. Omega, tout your history. Also, the Omega Museum that you can visit should be fully digitized online for people to visit, research, and fall in love. Turn Rolex's mandatory conservatism from a strength to a vulnerability. Rolex can't do a dark side of the moon. Omega can. Tudor could do a watch like this, but not at this price point. Omega can do this. This should be in the catalog forever, with an occasional disruptive design joining the catalog to prove that Omega has an audacity and a youthful verve that Rolex can never match. Rolex can do that with Tudor, but Tudor plays in the $2,000 to $5,000 price point. Now, wield that freedom like a weapon, Omega. Tudor can be reverent and adventurous, but not premium. Not super premium, not like Rolex. Rolex is super premium, but not rebellious and daring. Also, hire the best designers from outside the watch space. Bring in Italian car designers, Japanese woodcutters, Danish furniture designers, folks who design Bang & Olufsen home sound systems. And Swatch's own Rado already does this. So there's already in-house knowledge about how to get in contact with cool people and do cool things. Plus, NOMOS, they're renowned for going outside the company and working with hip designers to great effect. Ask them how that's bolstered their reputation, and they've grown from nothing since 1994. Omega, remember, you can bring in brand name independent superstar watchmakers and make them project leaders. Rolex products are faceless. That's the face of the Submariner. You'll never know the name of the man behind that watch. You'll never know the names of the men behind the original Rolex Submariners, or any Rolex Daytona, or GMT, or Sea Dweller. The brands are the faces of the franchise, and the name of the watch is as deep as you'll ever get into its human story. Only celebrity ambassadors are brought forward at Rolex, and they change with the currents of culture. Omega doesn't have to be this way. Make star watchmakers and designers a permanent part of the process. Look at Omega history. We know the names of some of the superstars. René Bonvart, founder of Corum, helped design the original Omega constellation. Afterwards, Gerald Genta got in on the act designing Omega watches, including later Connies. Maurice Grimm, a superstar watchmaker on loan from Omega, later helped AP design its first tourbillon watch. And Claude Bayot, we know the name of the man who designed the original Omega Speedmaster in 1957. Play that up and continue it in the modern day. Omega didn't even grasp that in 1999, when literally no one shopping in a mall knew the name George Daniels, no one knew who he was. Today, independent horology is cool, and Omega didn't even grasp that this was a prototype for what Omega 2018 and 19 and 20 should look like. Can you imagine if Peter Speak-Marin, now separate from his namesake brand, Andreas Streller and Stepan Sarpaneva were installed as project leads at Omega on a permanent basis today? Could you imagine if Roger W. Smith were offered an opportunity to continue his mentor George Daniels' work with Omega, and he accepted? I mean, what this would mean for Omega from an image standpoint? And I know from speaking to people inside the industry that the likes of Andreas Streller and even Kari Voutilainen have been hired out to design watches, and the price was a few $100,000 per project. Swatch Group, you've got that money. In a split second, you've got that money. If all it takes is cash, please make this happen. I'll also say, if the next generation of Constellations, Speedmasters, and Seamasters were designed by rock star watchmakers, this is something that Omega can do because it's always been associated with the names of the people behind its watches. Rolex can never let you know who designed its watch. Omega, this has got to be your trump card. And also, I want to say that it's important that Omega becomes a permanent and mainstream landing pad for superstar watchmakers to cultivate their fame as real brand ambassadors, the kind of brand ambassadors I can buy into, and so can you. Omega and BLBN should become a permanent seat of the kind of relationships that Harry Winston built in the Opus series. And in short, scarcity, a simplified catalog, regional products while building a global brand, and strong two-way dealer relationships, human faces behind products, and leading design. Omega, this is how you finally draw even with Rolex in the 21st century.